I think, right? 30 slides, and so if each of you guys want to take 10.
Like 5 each or 1 each?
No, if you just have 3 novice subscribers, it might be a
It's pretty good.
Right?
You just
Turn
break
it.
it all in.
I
Okay.
think we did okay this time.
So we are doing our review of the exam, and so Shane, you want to jump in and see what you thought?
I've always blue ball and dermis.
A blue ball on the dermis, composed of paler gray, darker gray cells to the periphery, and then peppered with jet black lymphocytes. You are correct. Okay, should we just go around?
Sure. I thought this was melanoma. One, context clue being the breadth of this excision.
So that would be one hint. The physician's intent was certainly something broad here.
And then 2, the irregular nest of melanocytes and packed together.
And there is a parallel theque pattern of the nests where they go parallel to one another within the dermis, which is typically a melanoma pattern. There's nuclear molding and atypia. There's pleomorphism. The nests themselves are bizarre shapes. There's junctional confluence. They vary in size and shape. They're not equidistant from one another. There's pagetoid scatter.
To make it sound like it was so easy.
Well, where people would trip up on this is there's dermal fibrosis, and some people might consider that scar and think about recurrent nevus. One of the hints is the overall breadth of the lesion, as you said, and the fact that it extends well beyond that area of fibrosis. Very good. James, how are you doing so far?
I'm hanging in, sir. 2 for 2.
Good. That's what we're after.
We could just cut the boards down there.
Okay.
So this sounds like an intraepidermal sort of acantholysis. I thought it was more consistent with Haley, but I guess vulgaris would be in your differential.
So vulgaris would be in your differential. Of course, TAD is always in your differential for an acantholytic disorder. Dariers might be in your differential as well. Haley, and you are correct, that's what this is, always gives you acanthosis as well as a full thickness dilapidated brick wall type of acantholysis. The other hint, if you look closer at the cells, what color are the rings around the nuclei?
You have like that halo or a pink halo around
They're
them.
all red, right? All the other acantholytic disorders can do blue, can do clear, can do red. Haley only knows how to do red ones. Right? So Haley only knows how to make red rings around the nuclei. So that's one other hint. Okay, let's pick up the pace here, because we got to get through and then get to clinic. But any that you need time to talk about, we want to take appropriate time.
I thought this was a foreign body granulomatous. There were chunks of crap.
So it is certainly granulomatous. There are a mix of foreign body and Langhans type giant cells. Foreign body granulomas usually have foreign body giant cells where nuclei are randomly distributed. Other granulomatous, especially infectious like tuberculosis, usually are predominantly Langhans where they form a wreath. This has a mix. Would you say these are more coated in a sheath of lymphocytes
Naked.
or more naked? So if they are naked, that certainly can go with foreign body granuloma. If you polarized and saw silica, what would that mean?
Sarcoid.
Still could be sarcoid. You know, most silica granuloma are people who evolve into sarcoidosis. We've all skinned our knees. We all have silica in our skin. Only a few people out of 100 or out of 1,000 make granulomas around particles of silica, and those are people who have latent sarcoidosis. So
Do you think it's a fair assessment to like try to differentiate foreign body from sarcoid in this
Did you see
situation?
the giant brown chunks of
It
chalk?
was like suture in there or something.
Let's see what we got.
Like on not this cut, but
Yeah.
like
right
that
there.
brown junk right there. What's that?
That is hairs.
Hairs?
Trapped in the
Like fractures.
Yeah,
little piece.
exactly. So it's
Shit.
destroyed hair follicle, and you got little hair follicle
I thought that was the foreign.
granuloma. Well, you might even have, though, you might have scar sarcoid in a different slide where you would get some foreign debris. That the key clinically would be to distinguish a straight foreign body granuloma, which tends to be lots of foreign body giant cells, from one that's basically a naked epithelioid granuloma with some giant cells. That's more likely to be sarcoidosis clinically. The key would be that this patient deserves a workup for sarcoidosis, with or without any foreign body nidus around which the granuloma formed. Because, that point is potentially tricky, and evaluation slide would usually be a little more, if a perfect sarcoidosis slide for evaluation probably would not have silica in it, unless the point being made was silica granulomas. You still need to evaluate the patient. So. Okay, David.
There's definitely some acanthosis, mostly irregular, and then there's newts and perikeratosis, newts in the horn, perikeratosis. So psoriasis, like I'm thinking, and then I thought there was a little bit of extravasated red. I don't know. I thought about pityriasis rosea too, but I think
So extravasated reds certainly can go with PR. Newts in the horn go with psoriasis. What's your full differential for newts in the horn?
so P-tick, psoriasis, tinea indigo, Candida, subderm, syphilis.
So you sort of have to run down that whole list. Does the acanthosis look like a psoriasiform acanthosis, big bulbous Mickey Mouse fingers, or are they skinny and long?
I guess they're skinny and long.
Icicle-like or ice pick-like or long, slender, and sexy.
Syphilis.
And so you'd look for other features of syphilis,
It's a little busy
including,
there.
is there a busy dermis?
Yeah, the other.
Do you have vessels with no lumen?
Yes.
Plasma cells may or may not be present, so you have to look for all the other features. So vessels with no lumen, busy dermis, long, slender, sexy, reedy, all of those things help for syphilis. Remember, it can be any mix, though. Syphilis with fewer features has effacement of the reedy predominantly rather than long, slender, sexy. And so in those cases, endothelial swelling, newts in the horn, busy dermis, plasma cells if present, all of those things become important. The paper that was just in the last journal, Cutaneous Pathology from Cleveland Clinic, looked at HIV patients with syphilis. The silver stain was positive, I think, in like 5% that they could see the organisms. The immunostain only in 65%. So you've got, 30-40% of patients where the immunostain is not going to be positive. And so you really have to have a high index of suspicion based on the H&E findings.
I think for the group we were looking at, like the other cut that was on the slide, it's not as
There's
active.
another cut that
There's
was
a-
not psoriasis.
That's very, so that's an active cut, and then if you go to the other side, that's the one we were looking at. So it's not as,
So
it's still there, but it's
newts
just
in the
not,
horn,
but it's not as busy of a dermis.
it's not as busy of a dermis. That is absolutely true.
So it's not as helpful to tell you stuff that's not something else.
So, one, look at all slides, or
Yeah.
all pieces on the slide. So first thing you do is hold up the slide, see how many pieces there are, make sure you've evaluated all of them. And run through your your full differential. I agree that this piece is harder than the other.
So it looks like we have a lot of like a just large caseating granulomatous process.
So you have granulomas, they're kind of stellate in shape, and the stuff in the middle, does it stain more intensely or less intensely than the surrounding tissue?
More intensely.
And caseous necrosis stains less intensely.
Okay.
So this is more likely what?
Fibrin?
Fibrin. So irregularly shaped palisaded granuloma around fibrin, what's your differential?
So I wasn't sure, but then I was thinking about it after, and maybe like a rheumatoid nodule.
So rheumatoid nodule, which would be what this typically would be, and then the other thing that mimics a rheumatoid nodule and looks just like it is a pseudo-rheumatoid nodule, and the other name for that is? Anyone want to jump in?
Deep GA.
Deep GA. So deep GA, the other name for deep GA is pseudo-rheumatoid nodule because it looks just like a rheumatoid nodule. Some cases of deep GA, you'll see some of the granulomas have mucin. In that case, you know that it's deep GA. If they don't have mucin and just have fibrin, it still could be deep GA, pseudo-rheumatoid nodule. So you have to look at the patient. So rheumatoid nodule versus deep GA depending on the patient, whether or not they have RA or rheumatic fever. Okay.
I thought this one was pretty good for BP, the newts, subepidermal.
So subepidermal
Not
bulla
newts, EOs, I'm sorry.
with eosinophils would be classic for pemphigoid. But I'm looking at my pick list, and pemphigoid's not there. What else could this be?
It could be EBA, but that's usually paucicellular. It could be
So,
bullous
but
lupus.
EBA, remember 20% of all people who look like classic pemphigoid are actually EBA. And those are probably all the ones who have cancer and all the ones who are refractory to therapy. So, or, you never say all or none in medicine, but pretty close to all for both of those buckets. So all your bad BPs are actually EBA. So that would be one. And then the other arthropod scabies would probably be your
Did you see
other.
less inflammation for EVA or?
Well, for most EBA, then you have that percentage of EBA that looks just like BP. Except that it can be perineoplastic or it's refractory to therapy.
Sorry, just wanted to reiterate for everyone. It's an important point.
Thank you for driving that point home because that it really can't be repeated enough.
Right.
Okay.
It's come up multiple times.
Yes.
So I got a dysplastic nevus. Maybe MIS, but there's like a little bit of pagetoid thought.
So, question would be, is it keratinocyte with pigment or are they melanocytic? And are the vacuolated cells pagetoid scatter or are they keratinocytes too? So if you see cytoplasm, like let's look here at you see a nucleus, then a vacuole, then cytoplasm. That's a keratinocyte.
Okay.
If it were a melanocyte, it would be nucleus, then cytoplasm, then the vacuole. So if it's nucleus, halo, cytoplasm, that's a keratinocyte. Okay. So the things that look pagetoid are all keratinocytes. When you look at the pigment here, the pigment's in little blobs or caps. That's also a keratinocyte pattern. So I'd say the pigment's probably within keratinocytes. And so you have little bulbous fingers hanging down, dipped in pigment.
This will run good.
Like a solar lentigo, very good. And the last thing, by the way, just shows that great minds think alike. The last. point out the salient question. Okay, how about this one?
This one I was kind of unsure of. I thought that it was kind of like syphilis. It was like kind of like lichen, but I wasn't sure if those were like actual sawtooth or they were like really slim. No,
Yeah, so the
sawtooth,
question is, syphilis would rarely give you dead reds,
Okay.
would rarely give you savant bodies. It can happen, but it would be rare. Syphilis is the great imitator. Is it ever wrong to think of syphilis? No. Syphilis probably should be in every differential except for what two morphologies in an adult? Vesicular or bullous. Pustule it can do. Pustular syphilis, great. So smallpox is called smallpox because what was great pox? Syphilis, right? So syphilis can be pustular, and there have been outbreaks of great pox in the 80s in New York City and about 3 years ago in Moscow. Big outbreaks of great pox. So
Congenital or infantile?
no, adults, all ages. What Justin's referring to is the other morphology. The morphologies you don't get are vesicular or bullous, except in congenital syphilis. Only congenital has vesicular or bullous. Adults don't get that. But otherwise, syphilis in all morphologies. For this one, I'd say compact hyperkeratosis, pretty much no parakeratosis visible. Sawtoothing. So a lichenoid pattern. What's your differential for lichenoid dermatosis?
LP, lichenoid drug, progression, lichenoid, HD.
Very good. Acral lupus. So all of those things you basically have to run down the differential and see what your patient has. Okay, how about this one?
So I felt this was a squamous proliferation.
Okay,
I
very
had
good.
difficulty because of the acantholysis in some areas, calling it benign.
Okay.
Though I couldn't find a lot of atypia.
So this solidly fits into the category of DST, squamous thing, right, where now you have to figure out is it malignant or benign. And what would you call all of these whorl-like structures?
Like squamous eddies.
Squamous eddies. So the squamous eddies are a big hint. The other thing is, look at your periphery. Is your periphery jagged or is your periphery very, very smooth?
The periphery is smooth.
So the periphery is very smooth. It's full of squamous eddies.
So then you would favor a benign process.
Yeah.
I
And
didn't
if
see
you
that
were-
acantholysis before in a benign process.
You can get that appearance of acantholysis, but when you look closer, it's not really acantholysis. There are no round cells floating off.
Okay.
They're all hanging on with stretched desmosomes.
Okay.
So it's really a little bit of edema
Okay.
in it. The lesion got a little edematous. So this thing with lots of squamous eddies and a smooth border, if it were largely exophytic, you'd call it
SAB, sorry.
irritated seb. And if it were largely endophytic, you'd call it
IFK.
IFK. Exactly. And this is kind of half and half, so call it whatever you please. Just don't call it malignant. Okay.
So you have what looks to be a lot of papillary dermal edema.
So a lot of papillary dermal edema. So that degree of papillary dermal edema with lymphocytes, what things would you think of?
Arthropod, PMLE.
So PMLE, arthropod, maybe perniosis, if it were acral skin. Whereas this amount of papillary dermal edema, and these are all neutrophils with karyarexis.
I thought it was sweets.
So sweets, absolutely. This is a sweets pattern. So nodular and diffuse infiltrative polys, karyorectic debris, massive papillary dermal edema, classic sweets. But I don't see sweets anywhere on my pick list. So what else looks just like sweets?
Like the pustular dermatoses of the dorsal hand.
So pustular dermatosis of the dorsal hands.
Sweets.
Bowel bypass.
Oh yeah.
syndrome, so blind loop syndrome in someone who's had weight loss surgery. Those would be the classic ones, and also GCSF can do it.
We have like 10 minutes left, Doctor.
Okay, so we're going faster.
I thought this was PCT.
So you are correct. PCT, caterpillar bodies and festooning.
Lymphoid follicles, ciliated, like goblet cells, like a bronchogenic cyst.
So it's a cyst with lymphoid follicles in the wall, and you do see some goblet type cells. So, but do bronchogenic cysts usually have big lymphoid follicles? Which one has branchial cleft cyst? And they're probably variants of the same cyst. There's a lot of overlap. But with the big lymphoid nodules, we usually call that branchial cleft.
Polymatricoma.
Pilomatricoma, shadow, baseloid cells. Well done, you nailed it.
I had no clue for this one.
See these pink V's?
So I put versiform xanthoma, but I thought you need parakeratosis. Like
It's usually a scale crust on top of it. Pink V's, and the pink V's are filled with neutrophils, and they're pointing down like arrows at the xanthoma cells below, which can be pretty subtle. I mean, here you can already see them at this power up in the papillary dermis. They can be more subtle than that. But in acanthoma with pink V's filled with neutrophils, versiform xanthoma should be top of the list.
Oh, crushed.
Dermatitis with this one.
So you have newts in the dermal papillae, so DH pattern. What else can look just like DH?
I'm not sure.
So anyone have a mnemonic for that?
Okay.
Plaid, which would be neutrophil-rich pemphigoid, bullous lupus, EVA, linear IgA, and DH. So it's good to know that you have to run down a little differential when you have a DH-like pattern. Okay, how about this one? Clear cell acanthoma or pale cell acanthoma, another lesion that always has a scale crust over it, always has some neutrophils and karyorectic debris, an abrupt cutoff from the normal epidermis to the glycogenated.
I said Paget's. I guess you'd ideally probably stain those to make sure it wasn't like Paget's CC versus Paget's melanoma versus Paget's disease.
Yeah, and in this one, do the cells spit out intact or do they keratinize into a thick stratum corneum?
They keratinize, so I guess you'd favor them Paget's LCC like a Bowen's.
So a pagetoid squamous situ, so Bowen's basically. And Paget cells are not capable of keratinizing. Here, these cells produced a big, thick corneum. So that was a clue that it was Bowen's.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I wasn't exactly sure. You have some granulomatous changes deep in the dermis. There were some areas where there was like these clefts that I was wondering if it was like silica or something like that.
Or cholesterol
Right
when they're needle-like clefts
Yeah.
like that. So cholesterol clefts, and then you have intersecting bands of pink necrotic collagen, and they are intersecting kind of at right angles. So if you saw this one coming across that way, and that one coming across this way, what letter would that make?
An X.
An X. Do you know any lesion that defines itself by those big red X's of necrotic collagen together with cholesterol clefts and neutrophilic debris in a granuloma? So necrobiotic xanthogranuloma, NXG, usually advertises itself with those big red X's of necrobiotic tumor, and then about a 50% chance of myeloma. Okay, next one.
I thought this was MF.
So you have basilar tagging of large, dark, angulated lymphocytes, papillodermal fibrosis. When you look at your infiltrate below, it is not so much symmetrically around the vessel, it's more to the top, so you have a little bit of a bare underbelly side. So I would agree with you, MF.
Close, man.
Okay.
After mustard kills it.
So you kind of a superficial and deep next to infiltrate, really lymphocytic. I mean, there's a lot of clefting. I still kind of put this in the interface category.
So it's an interface category.
Thinking
and
lupus erythematosus.
so lupus, it likes what portion of the hair follicle? Mid-dermis, isthmus.
Okay.
LPP stays up by the infundibulum. Lupus loves the isthmus. What's all the space between the collagen about?
So probably mucin.
Probably mucin, so I agree with lupus.
See the vellus hair cyst, eruptive vellus
So
hair cyst.
vellus hair cyst.
I thought this was granuloma facial.
Where's the granuloma?
In the name.
In the name, not in the tissue. So it is a chronic leukocytoclastic vasculitis with eosinophils and typically a Grent zone on facial skin. So that's granuloma facial.
Big thing.
It's a big thing. So inflammatory or tumor?
Looks like a tumor.
You're doing well.
Yeah.
And is it nucleus only blue, or does it have lots of cytoplasm around the nuclei?
I think there's cytoplasm.
Yeah, so it's red at scan with lots of cytoplasm. And then you have all these circular clear things, which are ducts. So if it's a sweat gland tumor with lots of ample cytoplasm around the cells and duct differentiation,
Yep. I'm not sure. Lymphoma or something.
yeah, so acrospiroma group, and that includes poroma. It includes half the chapter, right? Because poroma's in there, hydrocanthoma simplex, dermal duct tumor of Winkelmann, clear cell hydradenoма, nodular hydradenoma. They're all acrospiromas. They all look the same. They're just different places in the dermis or epidermis. Right? That one has some clear cell change. Some people might call it a clear cell hydradenoma. It doesn't matter. Any kind of acrospiroma is fine. Okay, Shane.
Well, what I saw was the big large nerve in the superficial portion. So I thought it was that,
You mean this thing?
yeah.
Probably erector pili.
Oh, really?
So they're along. I mean, that one is faking you out, looking a little wavy, but you have vacuoles, which are the little glycogen snack, and big, long, cigar-shaped nuclei. So that's erector pili.
Threw me off there.
That's so if you have thrombosis,
So,
expansion of the vessel wall, red cell extravasation because of vascular damage, neutrophils kererexis, probably LCV, the neutrophilic dermatoses like stills and urticaria won't tend to have kererexis.
This looks great for NLD.
So like a layer cake with the granulomas layered between the necrotic collagen, so that's necrobiosis lipotica.
I thought this was good for a blue nevus.
So like good for a blue nevus, except it doesn't have a lot of its own stroma. And so if it doesn't have, maybe this piece has more stroma. So this one really does look good for a blue. If it looked all like that, that might buy a little further evaluation for blue nevus like melanoma.
I thought this was a granular cell tumor.
So it is very delicate skin, and are these granular cells or lipidized xanthoma cells? Do you see any giant lysosomal bodies as you would in a giant cell tumor?
I think you're tricking me, but your tone reflects whatever. I don't think that's true.
So these are grayer than granular cell tumors are more Barbie pink. These are grayer, and it's on thin, delicate facial, probably eyelid skin. So. So I agree with you that is anaplasma. So one of the reasons to do the exercise is to see what things trip you up so that you get to review 20 of them and make sure that they don't trip you up. Okay, how about this one?
This is a chondroids here.
Yes, exactly. So this is mainly cartilage with a little bit of branching alveolar duct. So this is a chondroid, right, with the small duct part. And last one.
Lots of necrosis and split. I mean, like SJS, TEN maybe?
So like Stevens-Johnson, TEN. So there are lots of neutrophils, which could be just because it got secondarily infected,
Right.
or could be primary to the process.
Like near IgA?
The horn is certainly an acute horn, right? We look down in the dermis and we look for papillodermal fibrosis. Don't see a lot of that. Look for deeper pigment. I see some pigment that's down around vessel. So that suggests the possibility of fixed drug. So, this one you'd look at the patient. Fixed drug tends to have a polymorphous infiltrate, but TEN, EM that has gotten impetiginized could also have lots of nudes. A little bit of deep pigment, so I'd give it a differential and then look at the patient because it's going to be usually clear-cut one or the other, and I think we are right on the dot.
You don't.
Okay.